Are you curious to learn how much I spent last year on my garden space and what it saved me in the end? And this video is for you. Over the holiday break, I crunched the numbers to prepare this video here together. So I'll walk you through month by month what I spent and what I saved in the end and what little income I had here and there as well. So yeah, let's get started here. I'm Steffi. I'm a home gardener here in Attleboro, Massachusetts. It's zone 6, and I love to share here my experience with you on this platform. So welcome to my channel. Quick disclaimer over here. This video is not meant to be a guideline on what you need to spend for a successful garden year. I'm only sharing my information on what I spent my money last year, and you will see I spent on a few things where I bought myself convenience because I was very busy with my daytime job last year. So please keep that in mind when you compare your budget to mine or anything like that. It's just me sharing information here. It's not meant to be a guideline of any way. The next one is my garden intention is not to save money necessarily. I gardening for the joy of gardening, to be outside, to be with my plants, to have something which brings me away from the computer and my day-to-day life to like relax. And this is really, really hard to measure in gold, if you ask me. Of course, saving money is a wonderful side effect for a few things, which we'll see later in this video, but this is not my main purpose of like squeezing the maximum out of my garden for the maximum savings, for example, right? So just keep that in mind as well. And then also what's important to know is the calculation, which we'll see in this video, is based on an existing garden space. So it doesn't factor in what it cost me to get the garden going. I think that's important to understand as a distinction. And then the last one is, I know such a video always invites a lot of opinions. So be nice in the comments with everyone who shares their opinions. Feel free to share them. I invite it, but just be kind to each other. All right. Let's get going. So to set the stage quickly on what is included here in the expenses is we're looking at my full garden space, right? So I have here my beautiful large garden space, which is 180 square feet, cut flower garden. So the large L's around it is all cut flowers, and the beds in the middle are all vegetable garden, which is 160 feet. I also included like my grow bag garden in the driveway, which is mainly there to get my potato production going. So, and is a little bit of an overflow lot for seedlings, which don't have space in the other spot anymore, but that is there. And what's also included is, for example, when I spend some money on plants for my window boxes in the front yard, right? So all kind of like garden related expenses are included here. Let's start with the expense side of things. So most of my garden expenses are happening in the first half of the year because that's typically when I get going, when I get the garden going, right? Like April and May are my heavy set up the garden, get the garden going time frames, and then like March, April, and a little bit of February are already the time frames where I've started my seeds. And that is very, very visible in the expenses as well, as you will see it here. So let's go through it month by month for the first half of the year. And then I have a box here below for the like second half of the year. And you will see it's vastly different from what I've spent in the first half of the year. So in January, I spent $45. That was just one little seed order here in January, nothing crazy. Typically, I order either seeds very, very early, so November, December, for a few things I need, but I have these days a good number of seeds, which I use and just replenish when I need something new. I'm not like switching all varieties up every year in the garden. I'm very much focused on simplicity at the moment because I'm so busy with my work life that I just don't have time to experiment with a lot of things. So I'm like keeping my setup pretty like the same from year to year to really ensure at the moment that I know what could come up, or just to have it a little bit more easy, if that makes sense. So looking into February over here, pretty much the same. Although this one here was, I think, already a little bit of soil, which I got for my soil blocking needs for my seedlings. As you might know, for all my seed starting equipment or my seed starting setup, I mostly use soil blocking, which means I need some soil to mix it up and then to press it into my cubes. That is typically what I get around February. And I think that was my pit moss delivery. So it's like one big bag of soil, which is the main ingredient in my soil mix. If you're curious to learn more about soil blocking, make sure you subscribe to my channel, because I am going to record in the next couple of weeks a very, very detailed soil blocking video, which is going to come out probably end of January, beginning of February, with everything you need to know about soil blocking, so don't miss out on that. Moving on. So here in March, this big hike is what I typically spend on my soil testing needs for the beds. Every bed gets like one soil test to make sure that I know like what's the differences in the different beds, because they get different plants throughout the year. For that reason, like different nutrients are taken up differently. So every bed gets their own soil test, and that is for me a non-negotiable. For example, I want to see in the beginning of the season what's the status with my soil, so I'm able to amend it the way it's needed for a good growing season, because the soil is in the end the foundation for all of your garden success, if you ask me. So that's why this is always in my budget. It's around $200 depending on the amount I do. Sometimes I do a couple more for a few things around as well. So yeah, that was the March expense. And now when we come to April and May, those are the big ticket items. So I bought myself convenience last year, because typically in the beginning of the year, I always top off my beds, because like over the year and with all the dahlia digging and like all the work you do in the garden and just nature, like working through organic matter, like the soil level decreases over time in your beds. And last winter we had so much rain that it's compacted the soil so much. Like in most beds I had like a 4 to 6 inch gap to the top of the beds, which had to be filled back in, which was like the most I've ever had to top off my beds in spring. But as I was traveling so much, and typically what I've done in previous years when I had some time to deal with it, also under the week, I typically got like a bulk delivery of soil from one of the local nurseries, some loam and some compost, mixed it up, put some perlite in, did my own mixture to top it off. But it takes time. It takes space away in the driveway, which at the moment with like 5 drivers and 4 cars in this household, I can't surrender driveway space for so long. So what I did this year was getting large raised bed soil mixes from our nursery and getting them into the beds when I had time on the weekends. So I did this like in April when I started, for example, to transplant the onions, the snapdragon stuff. I got the first few bags in that corner where they had to be planted, and then in May I did get the rest of it. And for that, you can see that in May was a spike in expenses. That was not only the soil. I think I calculated like the soil bags in total for the garden was around $700 in total, where the bulk delivery just would have cost me around like $300. But it's also not necessarily the same, because I got like the really nice quality raised bed soil mix from Coast of Maine, which is one of our local like soil brands around here, and their stuff is top notch, but you pay unfortunately for top notch as well. All organic, all well mixed, and my garden flourished in it, right? So I did buy convenience, and yes, I know it was expensive, but I enjoyed just like grabbing like every weekend like 5-6 bags or so from our local nursery, hauling them over. It was easy, it was clean, it was easy to put into beds, and I didn't have the mess in the driveway to deal with. So for me personally, it was worth it. The other expenses, which then leaked into May and also June, were that I also, of course, got some plants, although not as many as I usually got, because I was growing out all of my patio plant, like my deck plants and my front steps plants, where I have some beautiful planters. All of those got grown from seeds, so I saved some money over there. But here in the front of our house, we have some nice window boxes when you like pull up, which I rarely show. I think I had it in some old videos, but there's otherwise not so much to look at on that side of the house because it's also in the shade. So I don't grow shade plants from seed. That is too much hassle personally, if you ask me. And those I always get, and like it's always like some money which goes into those planters. So that's usually like around $400. And those plants also get more expensive every year as everything, right? So that's not a small bucket. So April, May, and June, the biggest expenses were here. My soil convenience I bought, plus decking out my containers in the front. Those were definitely the big ticket items. And now you can see also why I condensed the following 6 months together, because that's way smaller for that. Because like once the garden is rolling, I rarely spend anything. Like those $240 were like another tool I got because I broke a shovel. So that's something what we got back from Home Depot. The garden extra fencing because of the groundhogs was in there too. Or that might have been already in June. That was like June, July timeframe where we got extra fencing because I had to fence everything last year to get the groundhog away from my plants. Yeah, so overall, the main items for me were the soil, where I bought myself some convenience and paid for it. But other than that, amendments are typically something what I always do after I get the soil test. So that's somewhere in the April bucket as well. But yeah, that's just something what's important to me to make sure the soil health is cleared, and the rest is just, let's just say, me spending here and there also on things I like for my garden, right? Don't we do it all? Going to the nursery is really hard to go to a nursery and not buy a plant of some sort. That's represented here. If we total it all up, we come to $1,791, which I spent in total for my garden. I know that's a lot of money for a lot of people. Again, it's my hobby. I love to spend on it. It's worth it for me. So please, again, take this with a grain of salt. Moving on to the assumptions for my savings calculation. So as you might know, I track all of the harvests I do, like everything, like every tomato, every pepper, whatever, every vegetable which gets grown in the garden gets counted and gets weighed. And yes, I'm a nerd, but I really enjoy just seeing year over year, like the differences in yields. I can also very quickly compare which variety works better versus another one, because I track it on a tomato base, for example, by variety too. And yeah, again, like data brings me joy, data gives insights. So I really love to see where I do well, and that is why I track it. And I know not everybody does it, and it's perfectly fine if you don't, but I have the data. So in that case, what I've done is, for the savings calculation, which you will see on the next slide, is that my assumption is, as I do think of my produce as premium organic produce, I went in and calculated everything just on average with a $2 per pound price. Just again, to not overcomplicate it here, but we'll see what I actually like harvested in the different month, and with that, what I saved in produce, because we got it from the garden. On the cut flower side of things, what I did there as an assumption to calculate the savings is that I just priced per bouquet a price of $25. I would think my bouquets would bring, or would be more expensive if I would buy those big dahlia bouquets for myself. But again, I want to be conservative and I don't want to come up here with a crazy number of savings. So let's just say it's $25 per bouquet. What I calculated for the number of bouquets was, from the moment I had non-stop flowers at my expense, to calculate per week 1 bouquet, which in reality I had like per week like easily like 2 to 3 bouquets going on. But let's just be realistic, I would never spend like the money for 3 bouquets per week, right? So that's just not realistic. So I calculated here 1 bouquet per week, and then every other week 1, which I also take to a friend, which I see, because meeting me in the summer is like going to the farmer's market. You get vegetables, you get a beautiful bouquet. So that's always fun and something what I enjoy to do, to really share the flower love with friends as well. So that's what I based my numbers on. So, and we'll do the same logic as we did for the expenses as well as for the savings. As you can imagine, those things happen more in the second half of the year. So we start in July with it, looking at where we start with the savings. So when we go over there, and I'll check this here. So we start in July, and July is already a really, really good produce month for me, which, yeah, in July, a lot of things start to roll in, tomatoes start to roll in, but also typically starting at 4th of July, I have already like flowers nonstop. And I actually have flowers typically already more sporadic in throughout June, but in July, that is when it starts cranking. So yeah, that was $289. Again, keep in mind, those are average prices, which we calculated here based on my assumptions. August is the big month where all of the larger harvests happen for me in August. And in September, it is still a good month, but that is typically, and last year we had so many diseases going on. Like I had like July and August were really prime, but then like blight and everything caught on. So I could see like a dip in the numbers, like for like tomatoes and stuff, very, very sharply from the moment the disease is spread. So that's just what happens, right? Then when we look into October, as you know, that's where just the weather gets erratic. We actually had our first frost in October 15th or 16th, which was pretty much on time when it's supposed to be. The previous 3 years, it was still warm enough until the first week of November. So no hard frost until the first week of November or very, very late in October. But last year we had our first frost pretty much where it's supposed to sit in the average first frost date. So that was then where everything or most things stopped. And then in November, I still had my big, big carrot harvest. So that's pretty much the pounds which we harvested over there. And then December with nothing because I don't have anything. I don't have any flowers. I don't have anything else going on. But you can tell you can save some money with a good garden, especially with a vegetable garden, right? So I really enjoy not buying any vegetables in the summer. And as we all know, everything out of the garden tastes so much better. So that is really a pride and joy. Again, I don't do it for the savings, but it's nice to see what money it could save me theoretically, right? So, which is really nice. I did have some other income streams as well in the beginning of the year, which wasn't small either because I actually sold a good number of tubers to one of our local flower farmers here who asked me if I could share some of my tuber stock with her because she had a storage failure over the winter, and I was happy to give her a good deal on my tubers so I didn't have to deal with finding homes for my tubers I couldn't plant. So that was I think like $440, and the difference in between is what I made with my journal sales. So which isn't much because like what I get for an Amazon journal would make you cry if you know how much I make from that price. But yeah, anyway, so that was just some other income streams I had in the beginning of the year. And this totals up to $2,116. Again, it's a theoretical number, right? It's like money I save myself by not spending on flowers in the summer, by not spending on produce in the summer. So it's not hard income except for what you see in January or January to June time frame. That was true extra income. I thought it was just a fun exercise to compare the both, and I had no idea where we'll end up to. So it was just really interesting, and my data nerd heart really got a kick out of it. So I hope this video was interesting to you. If we sum it up to like a full summary again, I saved a little bit over $300 in theory, right? Includes my real expenses from last year with the theoretical cost savings of the produce I produced and the bouquets I enjoyed in my house. It doesn't factor in any overhead costs for like my labor or what it cost me to set up my garden like 5 years ago. But I thought it was a fun experiment to share it with you, and I hope you enjoyed it. So I hope this video was interesting to you, just to see like a realistic look of what somebody spent on their garden throughout the year. Curious to hear what you spend and what you think about it. And yeah, let me know in the comments. You always know I love to chat with you in the comments. Otherwise, subscribe and watch another video. Thank you.